one of the most profound philosophers of all time, known for his complex ideologies and insights about metaphysics. In this presentation, we will discuss a brief background of his life, followed by his dialectical inquiry concerning history. Hegel was born in Stuttgart, Germany, on the 17th of August 770. He was the first child of George Ludwig Hegel and Maria Magdalena Luisa Hegel. The Hegel family had been through generations of Protestant pastors. Unfortunately, his mother died due to a bilious fever. The demise of his mother deeply afflicted Hegel's life that it even caused him speech impediment. Conversely, his relationship with his father was quite contrary to his mother. To put it in a milder sense, their father and son bond was somewhat strained. Parenthetically, his father was a lawyer by profession. When he was 5 years old, he was sent to a classical school. The love of learning was deeply valued in Hegel's family. At the age of 14, he attended Gymnasium Illustre, where he breathed the refreshing air of the Enlightenment and humanism of the Renaissance. During his years at the gymnasium, he came under the deep influence of Gotthold Ephraim Lessing, a German philosopher and prominent figure during the Enlightenment. At 18 years old in 1788, he went to Tübingen to study theology with the hopes of becoming a Lutheran pastor. In this prestigious German university, he became acquainted with another two famous German thinkers, Friedrich Hölderlin and Friedrich Wilhelm Joseph. Hence, three future world-famous thinkers were all at the same time studied at Tübingen University. Now that we have Hegel's family and academic background, we will now tackle his philosophical outlook. His philosophy is one of those that are hard to understand. It was believed that in order to understand him, we ought to familiarize ourselves with some Hegelian terminologies. One of these is his concept of spirit or Geist, from his first major systematic work, The Phenomenology of Spirit. Here's the conceptual framework of Hegel's concept of spirit or Geist. First is the subjective spirit, which is the human mind and our psychological senses, such as desire and willingness. Next is the objective spirit, which he refers to as the nation soul or Volkgeist. It is the shared essence of a common spirit in a particular community. It is the beliefs, customs, laws, and traditions. Connected to the Volkgeist is the Geist der Zeit, or the spirit of times and age. And now we have reached the pinnacle of self-knowledge and self-consciousness according to Hegel. It is the absolute spirit. It is when human beings finally reach the summit of philosophical enlightenment and self-awareness, equated with the absolute spirit acquiring full knowledge of its own ultimate nature. Human individuals' complete realization and enjoyment of their intellective and moral faculties, such as self consciousness, freedom, and ethical responsibility. In his phenomenology, Hegel talks about the spirit's consciousness of objects and holds that all forms, shapes, and shades of consciousness are abstractions from it, which is the subjective spirit. This means that one's conscious act of intending an object originally springs from one's subjective guise. Another term associated with Volkgeist is the Weltgeist. It is the unfolding through contradictions and resolutions, which happens at the world spirit, or again, the Weltgeist. It is the spirit that discloses itself in history, and it is responsible for the rise and fall of nations and the development of art, religion, and philosophy. It is the manifestation of the collective rational consciousness, historical developments, and the unfolding of humanity through history.
For Hegel, reality is not something static or fixed. He does not believe that reality is just a solid object that simply exists. For him, reality is dynamic and it is constantly developing. In his major work, Science of Logic, he begins not with assumptions about the world, but with the most abstract concept possible, which is the pure being or Sein. However, pure being, when examined, turns out to be completely indeterminate. It has no qualities, and because of this, it is indistinguishable from nothing or nicht. From this tension between being and nothing emerges the becoming. This means reality is not just to be, it is always the process of becoming. So, from the very beginning, Hegel shows that reality is movement, not stability. That movement is what he calls dialectics. Now, the question is, what drives this movement? What pushes development forward? For Hegel, it is contradiction. In traditional logic, contradiction is considered an error, where there should be no conflict. But for Hegel, contradiction is necessary. Every idea has limits, and when a concept reaches its limit, it creates internal tension. This tension produces negation, meaning the idea overcomes itself. But let's take note that negation is not a simple destruction. It is self-transformation. And this insight echoes Heraclitus, who famously claimed that war is the father of all things. For Heraclitus, conflict generates order. Similarly for Hegel, paradox and oppositions are not mistake. They are the very reason development happens. Now, for the next slide, when negation happens, does the previous stage completely disappear? Hegel's answer is no. This is where the concept of Aufhebung comes in. Aufhebung has three meanings at the same time. It is to cancel, to preserve, and to elevate. When a new stage appears, the old stage is aufgehoben. It is cancelled as an independent stage but lifted to a higher level. At the same time, it is also afterward, meaning preserved within the new stage. And this preservation is called Bewahrung. So development is not destructive. It is not like deleting something. It is more like a transformation. The previous stage still exists but in a more developed form. This is why dialectic movement is progressive and cumulative. Finally, what is the connection of this into history? Well, Hegel applies this logic to history, wherein he famously says, what is rational is real and what is real is rational. This means reality is not random. It has a logical structure. And this structure is the unfolding of Geist, or spirit, the development of collective human consciousness throughout history. History moves dialectically. There are contradictions in society, political conflicts, moral struggles, and these tensions leads to transformation. Each stage is limited, but when it is overcome, it is preserved in a higher stage. And where is all this leading? It all led us to freedom. For Hegel, freedom is not simply doing whatever you want. True freedom is becoming aware that you are part of the rational totality, a part of a larger historical movement. So, in summary, for Hegel, reality is not static being. It is dynamic becoming, driven by contradiction, preserved through sublation, and moving towards freedom.
Hegel describes the concept of Geist or spirit as the absolute idea, the self-sustaining and self-generating source of both nature and mind. This means everything, including the physical world and human consciousness, originates from spirit. According to Hegel, the world is not ruled by chance or random events. Instead, it is governed by providence. History follows a rational direction, not accidental causes. Moreover, he explains the nature of God in relation to spirit through a three-part dialectical movement. First is unity. God exists within God's self and for God's self. This is pure unity and eternal universality, where there is no division or otherness yet. Everything is one. Second is separation. Spirit becomes the world, which is the other of God concept. This is necessary wherein the spirit must differentiate itself to become real. Here we see nature, human beings, and history. Lastly is reconciliation. Hegel calls this the process of the world in love. Through history, separation is overcome. Spirit comes to recognize itself in the world. To expand that, Hegel utilizes Aristotelian logic to explain why the physical world is necessary. He argued that a universal or an abstract idea like greenness or humanity is only a mere potentiality that lacks full existence unless it is particularized or embodied in concrete things. Considering all that, world history is not just a series of events, but the theater where the spirit fulfills its becoming. Since history comes from spirit's differentiation as the absolute spirit, the unfolding of spirit toward the consciousness of its freedom is the true substance of history. Spirit does not act directly in a visible way, but achieves actual existence through human will and activity, which functions as secondary causes. Human thoughts, passions, and actions are the means through which spirit works towards its own self realization.
Although the absolute spirit or reason is the primary force behind this process, it requires a secondary element to manifest in the world. This element is human will and activity. Spirits makes use of the thoughts, emotion, passion, and action of individual as the material through which its rational plan becomes visible in history. This essence of history is its drives towards self-actualization, which Hegel defines as freedom or the only truth of spirit. To explain how potential becomes reality, Hegel's idea can be illustrated to the analogy of an avocado tree. A seed contains the essence of the tree in abstract form, but it must grow and develop to realize that essence as a living tree. In the same way, the absolute spirit must manifest in the world of appearance in order to move from potentiality to full awareness. One of Hegel's most striking ideas is the cunning of reason. Through this mechanism, reason allows human passions to operate even when they produce conflict, loss, and destruction. Individuals pursue their own interests without realizing that their action may serve a larger historical purpose, much like planets follow natural law without conscious awareness. From Hegel's perspective, reason can even use violent revolutions, wars, and the action of powerful historical figures as instrument for the gradual development of human freedom and rationality. This leads to the third question: what is the end of goal of history? For Hegel, the ultimate end of history is the full realization and self-awareness of freedom. History represents a progressive movement in which spirit becomes increasingly conscious of its freedom through human activity. This goal is ultimately realized in the organized state.
To further discuss Hegel's definition of states, he identifies it as the actualization and full objectification of the absolute spirit. He states, "It is in the state that freedom attains its objectivity and lives in the enjoyment of this objectivity. For the law of the state is the objectification of spirit. It is will in its true form. Only the will that is obedient to the law is free. For it obeys itself, and being self-sufficient, it is free." He went back to the concept of freedom and notes, "This is not the ability of having no constraints, but rather being a free man with freedom who acts to obey objective will or the universal and rational law by submitting the subjective will." As may having the already formed and organized states reflects the unification of the two said will, which he claims as the main and real object of the world history. He asserts, "In world history, we are concerned only with those people that have formed states. As in the states shows the nation spirits or the world spirits, or the stages through which the absolute spirits gradually achieves truth and freedom. Each nation has a distinctive world spirit. An example, in Germany there is a German spirit, which serves as the main goal of history. The freedom that despite consisting of violence and war, it only serves as a historical necessity to achieve rational enlightenment, an absolute prepositions that help shaping on how the civilization views its world." Ending the first chapter with a statement, "This is the reality and law of human thought, and metaphysics itself as a human knowledge abides by it. In fine, all metaphysical problems, questions, and issues are historical in character, and all metaphysical propositions are also historical both in essence and by necessity."